Autism can look different on different people. Take my two little boys, for example. Ezra is 9 years old. He has level 3 autism and he's nonverbal. My son Simon, on the other hand, can talk your ear off about all of his special interests. He's level 1 and he's 4 years old. Simon loves to go to school, be social, and visit his friends. He has all of his friends' names memorized and he can spell them all. Ezra, on the other hand, has a hard time communicating his feelings and seems to not really notice other people in the room. But he does notice, and he does understand a lot. He has been learning how to spell and point to his iPad to show us how well he can communicate. There are so many ways that autistic people can look different, especially between gender. In this video, we're talking about how autism can look different between boys and girls. In order for someone to be diagnosed as autistic, they have to have issues in 3 areas. All 3. Social, communication, and restrictive or repetitive behaviors or interests. So I'll be sharing examples in all of these 3 areas. Some from my family, from my boys, and also from many of the autistic women that I know personally, that I've interviewed, and who have put comments in this channel. The first one, social. I know autistic women and younger girls, even though they showed signs of not understanding social cues, which is the sign of autism, also having a hard time understanding the expectation of what to say next in a social conversation, which is the sign of autism. Even though they showed those signs, no one saw autism until they were a lot older. One of these reasons is because girls, compared to boys, are most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, more socially aware. So they're aware that, oh, a peer did not like that I just said that. Or they're waiting for me to say something, I don't know what to say. And so with girls, a lot of times the signs of autism look different. It looks like you see them masking, right? You see that they're very, very different socially in a situation with a peer compared to at home when they're comfortable with people who they know, who accept their autistic traits as their own personalities, and that's fine. And so in a social situation, they might act super different. Maybe that's because they're masking. Also, young girls will tend to script, copying a TV show or copying their other sister, copying a peer that they look up to, and they're like, she says something and everyone laughs. So why can't I be like that? Oh, I'm just gonna copy exactly what she says, or copy her hand movements and body language, and I'm going to do that. And a lot of times, autistic women can get really good at masking, really good at scripting, really good at copying other people, that their autism traits go unnoticed for a long time. Now I'm gonna let you be the decision maker and the judge on whether that's healthy or not. I have my own opinions about masking. You can see them right here. I think that can be dangerous, and that can cause deep psychological issues in the long term, especially if they grew up masking and they didn't know it. A lot of times, girls will show more of an obvious sign of anxiety or depression or social anxiety, and that's what their peers and their teachers and their caregivers, parents will see, and as they are hiding their autistic traits. With my son Ezra, he was an obvious diagnosis. That's what I was told when he was 18 months old by the speech pathologist. He's an obvious diagnosis. And so he had more of the characteristics and traits that are associated with more classic signs of autism in boys. Now with girls are really good at hiding. They're really good at pretending and acting. For example, a lot of boys on the spectrum will have special interests. That's a typical thing. Both my boys have their special interests. Simon, being level 1 autistic, we didn't really notice at first that he was autistic, even though I have another autistic son. And we went to the pediatrician, and who we love and still go to, he's great. And he suggested that, Simon probably isn't autistic. If he is, it's just barely autistic. Like, he's like, it's just a little bit, like, I don't know if he really needs to get diagnosed. And I told him, no, I want to know for sure if Simon is autistic or not. I think it's important to know so I can increase my understanding on how he's experiencing the world and help support him. And so I pretty much said that in my head, right? I don't know if I said that actually to him, but that's the reason why I wanted to get him assessed to know for sure. And lo and behold, he's autistic. So it was good to know. It's good to know that. Now with Ezra, his special interests were kind of a little odd. They were surprising for a neurotypical person to be like, really, that's your special interest? That's interesting. that I've never seen that before ever in an individual, right? His special interests are shiny wrappers that usually he finds on the ground or in the trash can. He likes to rip them up, and he also likes to take cords and wrap them around his hand. And so those things can also be considered and labeled as stimming, as self-stimulatory, like repetitive behavior that helps him deal with the uncomfortable world that he lives in. And if you don't know about stimming, we do a whole video here, 12 examples of autistic stimming. It's a really good one. I even have kind of like a little metaphor in there to try and help you understand what an autistic person might be feeling as they want to stim. Because honestly, I feel like we all stim at a certain level. Well, Ezra will have these repetitive behaviors that are just really obvious. One of his stims that he really likes to do, especially in public places that will usually get a lot of attention, is he will stim vocally. And so he'll have repetitive noises that people will kind of wonder about. A typical reaction will be like, what is he okay? So compare that to a little girl, maybe the same age, 9 years old, and she starts vocally stimming a little bit, but she notices and really cares about the reaction, the negative reaction she gets from peers and from adults. So she stops, and then she starts maybe stimming in a different way that's not as noticeable. That is something that girls can do. Not all of them, but a lot of girls who don't get diagnosed until a lot older will kind of hide those stims and will hide those autistic traits. I teach this principle in a book that I'm writing. It's a book that's especially for parents of autistic kids. So click the link in the description below to get your copy of the book. So let's go to communication. Now, I already mentioned idioms, but idioms really probably should be more in the communication category because it's not understanding the words that people are saying. Well, they do understand the words, they just don't understand maybe the meaning behind the words, because honestly, idioms don't make sense anyway. And I remember as a little kid, like trying to understand idioms, and my mom had to explain it to me. I mean, you kind of have to learn somehow, right? Because they don't make sense. It's like raining cats and dogs. Why would you say that? This is something that everyone has to learn when they're young, but I've noticed that Simon will come and ask me repetitively, why did that person say that? He will ask me questions to better understand what people are saying. He will also try and communicate in ways that he thinks we want him to communicate, but a lot of times we have to just patiently say, hey, buddy, I don't think you're saying what you mean to say. One time it was actually really funny. He's so funny. He makes us laugh all the time. He got mad at me that I gave him a plate of food that he did not want. And he's like, I don't want that. And I said, hey, buddy, let's say it nicely. Now we've taught him, kind of scripting here, we've taught Simon, our 4-year-old level 1 autism, that he can say, can I have, and then say what he wants, please and thank you. And so he was just like, oh, okay, I'm going to say this nice. Can I have, I don't want that, please and thank you. And I was like, you know what? You tried. That's great. And so I gave him what he wanted because I reward my kids with their effort, okay? Not necessarily because they got an A, but because they tried. But that's an example of just miscommunication, not understanding that social expectation of how to communicate. He thought that I wanted him to say, please and thank you after saying, I don't want that. We're still working on it. Now with Ezra, because he has level 3 autism, he has a harder time communicating how he feels and what he wants. And so we're still teaching him, and he's learning how to spell. He can spell here through RPM, and he can spell out, what he wants for lunch and things like that. It does take a lot of energy though. And so he's got to be really motivated. It's got to be his idea when he really wants to communicate. And if he's not feeling it, then that's okay. We've got an iPad with pictures on it that he can also use. Now with a lot of girls, a lot of times their communication issues are more subtle. A lot of times they learn to mask their autistic traits a little bit more. So for example, if they see people laughing, even though they don't understand why someone said something that was funny, it's like, why is that funny that person said? They might kind of still pretend that they understood and laugh and then figure out why the heck people thought that was funny later. In that situation, that person's gonna go completely unnoticed as autistic. And maybe that's what she wants. And I'm not saying that masking is all bad or all good necessarily. But put down in the comments how you feel about masking, because I love to hear people's opinions. Like if you are autistic or if you have a child who's autistic, do you want that child to act like they're not autistic? Do you want them to mask all the time or not? Do you want them to be accepted as who they are and be able to be comfortable in their own body? And if they need to stim, they need to show autistic traits, then they can. I'd like to hear your opinion on that. So put it down in the comments. Thanks. You never know who you might bless by simply commenting below. You never know who's listening. A lot of people will read the comments and not comment. I know. If they all commented, that would be great. But a lot of people will spend time reading the comments and learn from you, especially if you have your own personal experience with autism. If you're autistic or have a child who's autistic or a family member. I have several family members who are very close to me who are autistic, and 2 little boys, 2 sons who are as well. And I learn from them. I learn and grow from them every day. And I'm very grateful because Ezra and Simon are they're a very special and important part of our family. With communication, some autistic people might seem harsh just because they are telling you exactly how they feel or how they think. Maybe they're not being harsh at all. Maybe they're not trying to be mean, but they're just being direct. And so you can ask yourself that, are they being super direct or do they actually mean to be mean or hurt my feelings? An autistic person a lot of times is just simply being direct. And girls who are very direct might be viewed as being a brat or being rude or being really mean to the teacher. In reality, if that little girl's autistic, she probably doesn't mean to be that way at all. She's probably just being incredibly direct and answering your question very literally. So remember that when you're a teacher, when you're a caregiver, when you're taking care of kids, a lot of these girls who are autistic, they don't know they're autistic until later. And the people around them who are supposed to be supporting them might be shaming them simply because they're being direct, which is silly. We shouldn't do that. The next one is repetitive behaviors. And I kind of mentioned this a little bit at the beginning of the video, but sometimes a repetitive behavior in a little boy is just more obvious, where sometimes a repetitive behavior in an autistic girl, especially when they're young, is a little bit less obvious. So I'm going to give you some examples of some people I personally know. So Ezra will do repetitive behavior like flapping his hands. Simon will do repetitive behavior like running from one side of the room to another, back and forth every night. Lately, he still does this. Lately, it's been half an hour. But when he was younger, it'd be like an hour and possibly more. And we're talking every night. Even now, sometimes he'll be like, I can't go to bed yet. I need to run. And so like, okay, you didn't get your running in, and he'll run. He's got so much energy that he just needs to get out. And obviously he's processing and dealing with the way he experiences the world. So he'll run. Now that is more of an obvious repetitive behavior. Simon would run back and forth even when we lived in an RV in tight quarters. That was the first time I noticed that he might actually be autistic. We lived in an RV full time and traveled to all the national parks. Yes, with 5 kids in the RV. It's really fun. We still post regularly of our unique normals, so please consider subscribing. And I was grateful for that opportunity to notice those signs, because then we could get that diagnosis and then we could work towards getting more support and understanding for Simon. Now, on the other hand, girls who will do skin picking, or who will bite their nails, or who will bite inside of their cheek, or who will fidget under the table, have a fidget toy or fidget spinner or something, and will even, this is a little different, so listen to me on this one, but they'll even stim mentally. They'll start drawing with their mind the lines in the room. They'll start doing repetitive things with their mind. And sometimes it can look like they are being rude. They're not paying attention. Maybe if they're in school and they're supposed to be paying attention. But that can happen, especially with girls who aren't aware that they're doing it, but they're dealing with whatever they're feeling that's uncomfortable. They're having a hard time with, whether it's mentally, emotionally, or physically. And so with Ezra and Simon, they were able to get diagnosed a lot younger because these repetitive movements were more obvious. But a girl who masks her autistic traits, notices that, oh, she flapped her hands and someone said it was weird, and so she stopped. And so now when she wants to flap her hands to deal with, the emotional thing that she's dealing with, maybe she's regulating her emotions, right? She'll stim a different way by tapping her pencil because that's more socially acceptable. And so she'll do that. Let's say you have a child, a little girl, and you're wondering if she's possibly autistic. Maybe you see different symptoms like anxiety or depression or social anxiety, and you're going, she also has kind of sensory issues. This is a big one. It's not one of the three, right? The social communication and then the behaviors or interests, but it kind of goes with all three. A lot of the time, it's the reason why the behavior's happening, why they need to stim. I've seen this with my sons, and they will need to stim when they have been in a place with lots of people, and sounds and smells, and I know smells especially really, really bug Simon. He will notice smells that no one else in the family notices. Maybe Ezra notices too, but he's not telling us right now. But I can't even turn the heater on in the car for very long because Simon will be like, ew, it smells bad. I'll turn on the heater, turn it off, and then he'll be fine. And I'm like, does it even smell? Well, I believe him because even when I turn the heater on a tiny bit, he'll be like, Mom, it smells bad again. He can tell. So if you have a little girl who has those sensory issues, maybe she's really, really sensitive to smells. Maybe she's really sensitive to loud noises. Maybe she walks into a room and she's just like, the lights are too bright. I'm having a hard time with some kind of sensory issue. Those are some signs of autism as well. And those can relate to all three of the categories that we mentioned. So these are some good things to remember. I know it's super important as a parent, as a caregiver or teacher, to notice the needs of your child. So even if you're not in a position, like a teacher, you're not really in a position to be like, oh, hey, I think your child might be autistic. Maybe you're not in that position to do that, but you can still support them with their autistic traits that they're showing. And so that's why I wanted to put this video out here, is because I know girls who are autistic, and I feel like they just slip through the cracks. We don't notice them. We don't notice their needs. We don't notice how we can help them. And there's a negative stigma around getting your child diagnosed with autism, and it's definitely a deeper negative stigma on girls. Why is that? Can we just stop that? But culturally, we're becoming more accepting that boys can have autism, but girls, I don't know about that, because it looks different, and that's okay. Let's become educated. Let's educate other people in a loving way and give them grace, and teach them how autism can look different in girls, and it's okay. Especially one who is not being noticed, especially one who needs more support and is not getting it. Just a thought. Food for thought. Here's 12 signs of autism in girls, and here's our autism playlist. And remember, if you have an autistic child, you're in good company.